Hello, good morning, or afternoon, or wherever, depending on where you are in the world. Today is Sunday, February 27th. Let's set our intentions and make aspirations with the four immeasurables prayer. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. We're not going to do 37 practices of Bodhisattva today. We'll resume that next week with Victoria. And this week we'll just really work on meditation. For those of you who've been here for a while, we practice this one technique of mind, looking at mind. We're going to get a bit more specific on that. So when we get into the meditation, I'll do a little talking with the three, towards the three techniques that we use. And when we get to that technique, we're going to add something to that. I may go into why, I may not. Maybe we might discuss that next week, but we'll try it. And I think we're going to do a little bit longer session of meditation today. We're going to do 15 minutes, which is not really that long, but it's longer than what we usually do. But let's start with the 9 purifying breaths. Take right hand, the thumb touching like the ring finger closed to the left nostril. Breathe into it. Now remember, we're visualizing the 3 channels. Blue is the center, white on the right if you're a man, or identify as man, or and left is red. Those are reversed in women, or depending on how you choose to identify yourself or want to. And the channels kind of go from here. Think of them going up and around the head, down the back, along the spine. You can it helps if you have like a visualization of them and have, the trust that they do exist. I mean, these are energetic pathways that really contain and hold like vital energy and also mind, which is not separate from the body and not separate from the energy, to really have some confidence that that's there. That helps. So we'll take that first finger. We're going to breathe into the right channel. You're breathing in all the way down to the navel and holding it there. And then you're breathing out of that right channel. If the right is your white channel, you could breathe out anger. Aggression. Hatred. And we switch the left hand to the right nostril, breathing into the left channel. And if it's red, you're breathing out attachment. Attachment could also be jealousy. Attachment to negative energies and negative dynamics, negative relationships, things like that, where you're trying to cling in ways that are unhealthy. Breathe it again. Attachment to certain behaviors, addictions. Now we move to the central channel. We're breathing right into the blue channel. Breathing in wisdom. And breathing out obscurations, negative karma that blocks us from the truth. Truth meaning non-duality, interdependence, impermanence, um, those things that have blocked us from living and realizing our true nature of mind and true potential. Potential for being a benefit to others, going beyond ourselves. And the last breath, on the out breath, we're going to imagine it coming out the crown chakra, merging our consciousness with space, and then go into 15 minutes of meditation. A little bit more forceful breath on the out breath. Just settle into the calm, settle into a calm, physically, mental space. The most basic of the techniques, when you become aware that you're thinking, again, when you become, because you will start thinking, your mind starts thinking, when you're aware of it, catch yourself thinking, go back to the breath, specifically the place where the air moves in and out, where the nose meets the upper lip. Thought, distraction, outside things that are your sense faculties are catching, like noises and sights and feelings, temperature, things like that. Back to the breath. The second technique we use after we get settled into our posture and our breathing is becoming aware of the thought, and then imagining the thought, using a visualization of the thought being a cloud that has arisen in a limitless, clear, stainless blue sky. The sky being our mind, which is also limitless and ultimately stainless. Even though thoughts arise, they dissolve back into the mind. They don't affect the mind. They don't leave any trace once they're gone. They may arise again, but they leave no damage, no mark on the mind once they dissipate back into the mind from where they came. The trick is to recognize that you're thinking. And once you recognize it, apply the technique. And you will go back and forth doing this. The fact that a thought arises does not mean you're failing, does not mean it's a bad meditation, does not mean you're doing it incorrectly. It just is. It's just what the mind does. And that's what we're doing. We're working with the mind, which, as Garchen Rinpoche said, is Buddha, right? In Buddhism, Buddha is not a god, not worshipped as a god. Buddha attained enlightenment, which means he realized the full potential and nature of his mind, purifying all obscurations and negative karma that prevented this full realization and understanding and embodying the truth, right? The view that we talked about. Interdependence, empty of inherent existence, meaning nothing really has. Back to the breath. Nothing exists on its inherently on its own, right? Everything can be broken down into parts and subatomic parts, into waves and particles, which are ineffable at their very essence. We may feel like we're these solid, isolated beings, but we're really not. Even the most simple thing, sitting on a cushion, there's lines of interdependence. Who delivered it to your house, and who made it, and where it came from, and who milled the cotton, and who helped grow the, there's just chains and interdependence of. That's a very base example, So if mind is Buddha, what does that mean? Buddha is our true nature, which is awakened to the truth. Back to the breath. A thought arise, you're aware, you watch it dissolve back into that clear blue sky. And the third technique is mind looking at mind. So you're in your posture, your mind is watching the mind. What becomes aware of the thought? Because we're using a technique of when you become aware of your thinking, then you apply a technique. Well, what is becoming aware of the thought? Really look at that. It's mind looking at mind. Where does that thought come from? And what is it that sees it arise? Really investigate that. You need a certain amount of spaciousness to do that in the mind. A thought has arisen, and it could be something mundane, or it could be something that's very important to you. And then we become aware of it. Well, what's becoming aware of it? What is aware of it? It takes a certain amount of stillness and spaciousness and wisdom to become aware of what's going on in the mind. A certain amount of discernment, a certain amount of calm, focused, discerning wisdom to see the thought and to leave it where it is. Let it dissipate back into the mind. We're not getting into the story, letting it go, not letting the thought become reality. Just seeing it as a thought because it's a subjective view of an experience. In essence, it has absolutely no essence. In essence, it has absolutely no reality or essence, really. But that thing, that mind that becomes aware of the thought, that's where the juice is, if you will, right? That's where we're trying to settle. That's what we're trying to cultivate that experience of being it, dissolving almost into it, dissolving our mind into that mind. Through methods and teachings like the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva, the Four Noble Truths of the Buddha, those techniques, those paths are for us to purify negative karma, cultivate good karma that can allow us the clarity needed to connect to that wisdom mind. It's not to be a good Buddhist. It's not to be a good follower of the rules and things like that. It's simply to cultivate this open, spacious mind, realize the nature of mind, realizing the view of the truth, which is emptiness. And by emptiness, I don't mean voidness. I mean empty of inherent existence, like we said. Interdependence, impermanence. And that very nature of mind is truly who we are. The name is something we just put on our name, you know. Our life and the situation is extremely temporary. People come and go out of our lives. We come and go out of people's lives, you know. We age, we change houses and things. All those things, physical things, are temporary. What is that mind that's looking at mind? when you really taste it, when you really try, have a glimpse of it, even a momentary, the shortest momentary glimpse of what does it feel like? What is it? Is it familiar? Is it unfamiliar? Is it new? Back to the breath. So the mind is not just this machine that simply churns out thoughts like a computer, you know. Um, there's something underneath all that. There's a ground that's very fundamental. And that ground is the source of all wisdom. It's the source of compassion as well. Excellent. I hope that was clear. You were able to follow even a little bit. I think it's important to. I think it's a lot of you have been doing this for a while now. Both in this class and before this class probably, and it's important to work with the mind in that way and really start to try and really start to understand. Well, what is that mind? It's not just we're not just meditating to be calm. The first technique, going back to the breath, does bring a certain amount of calm as you practice it. You're not running away into your thoughts, and you're working with them and bringing back to that central place of calm. And even the second technique, watching the thoughts as if their clouds dissipate, having some freedom from the thought. And the third, mind looking at mind and realizing that the thought is not the mind, right? Solely the mind. It arises in the mind. And now we're taking another step to say, well, what is that? What is the mind that sees the mind? What is the mind that sees these thoughts? When we started this class, it was a secular meditation class, meaning there was no mention of Buddhism or Dharma or anything like that. It was simply meditation technique. And because of your curiosity in Buddhism and Dharma and stuff like that, I asked my teacher if it would be proper to discuss those things here. And he said, yes, as long as you keep the focus on mind. And I've said this many times, and I'm going to keep saying it because I keep saying it to myself. Because Buddha was not the name of a man, it's the name of mind. So this is not a religion that's saying if we pray to Buddha and do what he says, everything's going to be okay. This is a practice and methods for you to be Buddha, because you already are. It's just because of causes and conditions and habitual patterns, karmic accumulations over this life and many lives prior, um, or many lives, period, if we think of time as not chronological and time being something else, maybe. Because of those obscurations, we don't realize that nature. We don't live out of it. You know what I mean? We're not able to access that wisdom on a regular basis. So we need these methods, basically, to start to do that, dismantle these karmic accumulations. When we think of reincarnation, a lot of people get stuck on that. And you can't separate reincarnation from the fact of non-duality, right? So if you're saying consciousness gets reborn from one being to the next, well, if self is a certain kind of illusion, and we're not saying there is no something, I mean, something is here, right? Talking about from my point of view, say. There's something, there is a body here that I see in this subjective through my sense faculties that I have at the present. There's certain ways that this thought process works that's unique to me, but it's not the whole picture, as you say. It's a very narrow subjective slice. But if non-duality is the truth, right, and they're really on an ultimate level, there's no separation. It's not my life per se that's been reincarnated. It's not like Michael was a dog in his prior life. It's just like we said last week. So if you have a candle with a flame and you take another candle and you light the candle from that flame and you extinguish the other, now you have is it the same flame? Is it the same candle? Is it a new candle? Is it a new flame? So there's some kind of continuity, but it's not necessarily related to the labels that we put on ourselves for this lifetime, how we perceive ourselves, you know. So you can't separate those things, you know. So what is being reincarnated? It's not your situation. It's the karmic. If an easier way to think of it is almost like we're creating certain patterns of energy in the universe that don't go away, that don't, they may change over time and become more purified and more positive and less kind of heavy and negative if we're fortunate and we practice. But those patterns are not necessarily us with the names we have. They don't really have the same thoughts. They don't really carry the same external circumstances and things like that, but they do exist. Sometimes that's an easier way to think of it. So whatever that was in the prior life was not me. It was some being who was making certain actions. And the fact that you have a human form means that there was some good karma created in the past. Because according to Buddhism, it's not necessarily that easy to have a human form, because as human beings, we're lucky because we can practice Dharma. An animal can't really. That's a lot. We could take some questions, talk about some stuff. Maybe we'll be able to answer it. Any good meditation techniques for dealing with anxiety, traffic, long drives? For driving, it's good to, what could be good is like tapes, meditation tapes or just teachings. I used to listen to Pema Chodron when I used to drive a lot. Pemachhodron. She has a lot of good tapes. If you're not able to do what we're doing here because your attention needs to be so much on driving that you can't give it the attention that you do in this formal practice sessions, get some meditation tapes. When intense suffering happens, like the invasion of Ukraine, I struggle with my belief in the law of karma. It's difficult to reconcile the feeling of wanting to ease their suffering with believing they did something in another life to bring this suffering about. My heart believes in reincarnation, but my head has trouble. Well, it's exactly what I was saying. You have trouble feeling that someone in this life who you perceive as an innocent being has something horrible happen to them. It's easier to think that they're victims, that universe is just cold, random place, and this is just bad luck. But instead of trying to believe in reincarnation, maybe you really have to think about shunyata, or emptiness. Now, this is one of our classes was taught by Vesna Wallace, and she goes into this in detail because it's exactly what I was just talking about. It's like, well, I know what I've done in my life. I have never done anything that warrants somebody, putting me in a jail and torturing me. But to be honest, I have no idea whatever this energetic field that has, whatever this continuity of mind that I'm in now, whatever that was before in a prior lifetime, I don't know what that entity did. I really don't. I can't say I did. So when I do find myself in difficult circumstances, I have to know, well, because I do believe in karma, and I believe in cause and effect. I believe in reincarnation in the way that I'm talking about it, not in the way that Michael was this and was that. I believe in these continuations of mind and consciousnesses. The one thing you realize is when you do go through suffering and difficult times, that is the karmic ripening of these actions that have been committed that cause negative karma. So once the ripening occurs, it exhausts. So that's that seed. So you commit an action that's negative or positive, or whatever, and a seed results, an energetic seed that has the potential to come to fruition for negative result or positive result, unless there's some intervention, right, where that karmic seed can be purified through practice, right, through starting to understand the law of cause and effect, through really kind of understanding the action that you did. Now, you can only really do that in terms of taking responsibility for actions and atoning and making restitutions and apologies and amends in this lifetime. But the other karmic imprints from the other lifetimes can be purified through practice, through working on the mind. But if you don't believe in that reincarnation, and it's a hard pill to swallow, especially for us, modern people, who want to believe in some kind of. But the alternative is you believe in an unjust universe, which actually gives you no way of really dealing with anything. So if you're stuck on reincarnation, really think about, well, what is being reincarnated? What is, listen, they say we're made up of, right, substances, elements, just like everything else on the planet, in the universe. We're made up of elements. And those elements break down and can be broken down into atomic material and subatomic, and they even broken things down further into waves of energy, and those are even, I'm sure, broken down into further things. But even if you break it down to waves of energy, meaning basically we're like light that has kind of coalesced and solidified into what we are. I mean, that's a pretty heavy trip, you know. I don't know if that's helpful. I really don't. I mean, it's these are difficult concepts. But at the same time, if you really look at it, I can't look at one thing in this world system that we're in that's random. Everything that happens has certain traceable causes and conditions. If you are suffering, if you're in a war-torn country, for instance, well, the causes and conditions to that is that you were born to parents who were in this country at that time or moved to that country before the war and have gotten, I mean, it's not like you were just plopped out of the sky into, even if you were plopped out of the sky, depending on where you were plopped from, and the conditions of the atmosphere would determine where you're going to go. You know what I mean? There's nothing, anything has causes and conditions, which is karma, really. Okay. You said you should not use Tonglen on a situation person who's having a lot of emotions about them. I don't, I may have said that maybe. I mean, hearing it back doesn't seem so accurate. Um, Maybe because if you're having a lot of emotions in a situation, it means you're personally really engaged in that situation in ways that need some other tending to. If it's a family thing, you know what I mean, or something close where um, just doing that might not, there's other actions that need to be done that you're somehow responsible to. I don't know. Um, And when emotions are running high, it's often hard to have clarity and have some kind of discernment and awareness on how to approach it. So sometimes it might be good just to really try to quiet the mind before. That's all I'm saying. But I don't think you should, I don't think that emotion has to negate the use of Tonglen. Maybe just, you know, use those if there's a lot of emotions to really give you pause to really examine what's going on. I want to share this practice with my very Christian girlfriend without her thinking I'm trying to convert her or change her faith. Any thoughts on this? Well, first of all, she has to want this practice, and it can't be because you want it for her, right? I mean, you could say why you like it and why it's benefiting you and why you think it may benefit her. I mean, to me, we're really not doing anything religious per se. I mean, even when you're talking about reincarnation, I'm not saying that there's not a God who's choosing what form you're going to be in or what lifetime. We're working with our mind. Um, a lot of the stuff we're talking about in terms of shunyata and stuff and us being light is physics and nothing to do with religion, you know, and actually very much consistent with the Big Bang theory, if you will. There's nothing that negates those things. There's not much religion we're actually doing here or talking about. Buddha, like I said, there's not a God we're worshiping. Um, but there is, to people who have other faiths, um, it can seem like counter maybe or a challenge a bit to what they feel passionately about and have found to give them uh, a path that they feel is a heartfelt one and a real one. I mean, what you could do is just practice meditation without any, like we did in the first. You can go back to the very first on YouTube, the very first classes, which the 101 classes, which were secular meditation, had nothing to do with Buddhism. and just about really, shamatha, calm abiding meditation, mindfulness meditation. This time I used the mind on mind practice, found myself in a newer place. I immediately filled with slight tears in a peaceful way. Have you experienced that? Yeah, sometimes. I mean, it's good if you're kind of getting a glimpse of that mind looking at mind. I'm assuming what you're the slight tears about is the space that you found yourself in, that kind of calm, which allowed you to maybe feel some things that you've been trying to hide or trying not to feel or holding at bay or something like that. But that, I think lots of things come up when we meditate. Sometimes very scary things, people who deal with trauma, PTSD, things like that. Meditation can be really difficult and scary at first, and a lot of feelings can come up, which is why I always talk about if you are someone suffering from trauma, PTSD, survivors of trauma, survivors of abuse, sexual abuse, survivors, even addiction, recovery, things like that, to really do it in coordination with, some kind of therapy, some kind of psychologist, it really helps. And many psychologists use meditation and teach meditation to their, um, you know, patients or clients or whatever. The candle flame analogy was so clarifying. Yeah, it's kind of a good one. I mean, it's a difficult concept. I get it. They also talk about like a river, right? So like you stand on the banks of a river and you're watching it pass, right? So you looking at the river and it's 3 o'clock and you're standing on the banks of this river and you're staring at it, and then at 3:05 you're still staring at it. Is it the same river? Because the water's been moving for 5 minutes. It's the same water? Is it not the same water? What we're talking about really is continuity, unbroken continuity. But you really can't separate reincarnation from non-duality and shunyata, that concept of being empty of inherent existence, at the self being really this kind of subjective, cobbled together amalgamation of things that we accumulate, ideas, thoughts, physicality that we accumulate over time and create into this entity that we see everything from and perceive out of. You know, any meditation tips for social anxiety? I don't really know much about social anxiety as a clinical thing, so I can't really answer that. But I mean, a lot of people came to this class in the beginning because of anxiety in general. This class started really in the midst of the pandemic in the summer of 2020, when a lot of people were going through a lot of anxiety, um, uncertainty, and difficulty, and suffering, and things like that, fears, and found that meditation gave them some kind of help. So, if social anxiety is similar, then I don't see why it wouldn't. Why wouldn't help? I meditated to a certain frequency a matter of hours ago. I tapped into some energy that literally set off car alarms and dogs in the neighborhood barks. I'm not sure what I tapped into, but I know that after this, I have to live my life the best way possible. If you thought you might be the Buddha, what would you do next? Well, I said Garchen Rinpoche said that Buddha You say here, if you thought you might be the Buddha, well, Buddha is not the name of a person. It's the name of mind. So you already know you're the Buddha. You just, because of karmic imprints and habituation of behavior and mind and the way, those cycles that we are obscured from complete enlightenment and realization of mind and stuff like that. And that's why enlightened beings who have gone past that, purified that nature of mind, have taught methods and paths for us to do that. I am finding that during meditation, I have moments of crying, even with no thoughts. Is there an explanation? Yeah, it relates to what I said before, Emotion is often energy that's stored somewhere in the body and mind, it's like, and sometimes it can be frozen almost. Garchen Rinpoche always talks about mind, the obscure mind, the obscured mind, the mind that's, is engaged in, you know, grasping at the self and like closed mind. Think of closed-minded person, narrow-minded person. It's almost like those minds are like ice. And what we're trying to do is melt it back into water. Water is the true nature of mind. Water is that free-flowing, very malleable, very kind of just expansive, open, no resistance, rather than a solid block. So when we meditate, we're giving space to our thoughts, we're giving space to the mind, we're even giving space to the body in a way. So emotions that can be kind of closed and locked in there have an opportunity to loosen. And it makes a lot of sense that would happen. If we are lucky to be in human form, that means at some point we were animals. Not necessarily. It doesn't mean that we have to be animals. If that's the case and animals can't practice the Dharma, how did the animal get the karma to eventually become the human form? That's a really good question, right? Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who is a great teacher, mainly centered in Nepal, has centers all over the world, but Kopan Monastery in Nepal, Kathmandu is his seat, really. Constantly does prayers and pujas and rituals for animals for that very reason. Sometimes animals, think of a dog who pulls a baby out of a fire, creating tremendous amount of good karma by doing that, right? Certain animals are very loving to their offspring. Certain animals are not. And like I said, negative karma and negative karma that has been created through lifetimes has once that suffering that is experienced because of the negative karma created, once that suffering you've gone through that suffering, that negative karma is exhausted. And at that point, there's the opportunity to create new karma. Audiobooks when driving, I listen to Lama Surya Das, Awakening the Buddha Within. That's a good, this Donna is recommending that as a car audiobook for the car. Lama Surya Das was kind enough to teach one of the classes here with us. I notice the way you fold your arms during 9 purifying breaths. There's pressure points here that somehow correspond to those energetic centers. And that's why we're kind of grabbing here. Catholics, Protestants, and Jewish religions often offer meditation and yoga practice. Buddhism is a discipline and a practice. It is not a religion and is used along with your preferred religion, not as a substitute. Well, some people consider it a religion. I mean, I don't necessarily, but some people do. Some people use it as a religion. Some people practice Buddhism. Um, some Buddhists don't meditate, and some really do it almost like other religions and kind of pray to a Buddha and pray to some of the deities we see to, help them. But that's not what I've been taught. Do you know anything about recovery Dharma? No, I don't. But like I said, I think definitely Dharma practice and Buddhism can be a good component to recovery, but not, some of those strong things like trauma, survival abuse, things like that, and addiction. At this point or the point you are in your life now may be necessary to have other help besides just meditation or Dharma study, practice. Suppose we cannot identify what may have happened previously. Yeah, for the most part, we can. I mean, what you can do is look at what you have now and all the good things in your life, positive things, positive people, livelihood, place where you live, is the result of creation of some good karma at some point. How do we move forward without allowing our mind to play mental games of something akin to reprimand or shame for hard present experience? Um, hmm. Because I mean, you have to kind of connect it to the practice and what you're trying to achieve. I mean, what is shame? What's shame going to do? I mean, if you're talking about something from a prior lifetime, well, there's nothing you can do about that now except practice, and create, purify and create circumstances for positive karma, positive rebirth, and things like that. Um, and if it's something that you've done in this lifetime that you regret, you can become aware of it. You can make restitutions, you can make amends, you can make apologies where appropriate. We don't do these things just to relieve our guilt when they may be harmful to someone. They may be bringing up an old wound, taking a scab off an old wound for someone, and that's not positive. That's creating more negative karma because you're doing it out of a selfish place, and you make resolve that you're not going to do it again. You know, that's how we learn. We learn from mistakes in all aspects of life. We do. You know, and if we could have done better at the time, we would have, but we couldn't. We didn't have the benefit of some kind of wisdom. We didn't have the benefit of some kind of knowledge. Um, we didn't have the benefit of understanding why what we did was wrong at the time. We might have thought we did something we may have done something very negative and thought at the time it was appropriate and right. Now, 20 years later, we realize I was so misguided then. But that's where we were. What do you think of meditation apps? I've never used the meditation app, so I'm not even going to address it, but a lot of people seem to like them. I don't know anything about it. During meditation, we try not to follow the history of thoughts and leave them there. Could one of those thoughts be a brilliant idea? Yeah, if it's a brilliant idea, maybe write it down. I mean, listen, if you're we're not saying ideas and thoughts are the enemy, you know. We're trying to gain some kind of awareness so we can work with our mind in positive ways, you know. I mean, I work in creative fields like writing or screenwriting and things like that, and you need your imagination to flow. But so it's not like I don't approach writing like I approach meditation, where I'm sitting there saying, "Oh, there's a thought, I'm going to let it go and just space out." That's not the point. If you're listen, what we were talking about before here, this is a very good question. We were talking about mind looking at mind, right? So you have a thought. I'm really angry at this person, so and so, because they said something very insulting to me this morning. And then I become aware that I have that thought. And then I look at the mind. That what is becoming aware of that thought? Mind is becoming aware of that thought. What is that became aware of that thought? Is it Michael that became aware of that thought? Is it my brain that became aware of that thought? Is it consciousness that became, like, what is that space? And can I touch that space? So now we're not just spacing out into some kind of, non-thought bliss state. We're actually getting in touch with some very specific discernment, mindful discernment, of what our mind is doing. Okay, if we have any more questions, we can do them, and then we can. Okay, how far from and deep to the spine of the there's three channels. Remember, there's a central channel is blue. The two channels beside, so you can almost think of them like as big as a finger. Running really close to the spine. All right. Yeah, it's a difficult time right now. There's war happening, and war that can escalate. And yeah, I mean, I have, like a lot of people, political beliefs and things in the world, and often feel compelled to post them, like on Instagram, and make those known. And I, like everyone else, thinks that my opinions are correct, which that's a very relative situation. There's lots of causes and conditions that go into a situation like what's going on today, of course. But when a nation is invaded, that's what follows next is death and destruction, right? We know that. And I was posting something about why isn't other people helping this country that just seems so, overmatched, and just this, we're going to be overrun, and, a lot of carnage and killing, and what going on, and saying, well, that's not, it's not Buddhist to, if you're on the subway and the person next to you is getting beat up, because you feel like by intervening and subduing that person who's doing the violence, you're committing more violence. That's not a Buddhist thing. Buddhism does not mean, there are situations where you may have to defend someone, because also offering refuge and protection to people is something very karmically positive and a duty in some ways, you know. So we have to understand that, you know, people talk about nonviolence, and of course, that's always what we hope to be. But there's situations where you may have to, you know, physically do something to prevent something worse happening, right? I mean, if I'm sitting in the subway and a woman's getting raped, I say, well, the only way I could stop this is by clonking the rapist over the head with a pole, but I'm a Buddhist, so I can't commit violence. That is not Buddhism. That's not that's not creating good karma. You know what I mean? For some karmic reason, you've been put into that position where you may have to act in a way using some kind of something to stop it. You're also, think about it like this, by stopping a violent act from happening or going further, you're not allowing that person to create all that bad karma, right? Interesting. Any suggestions for establishing a regular meditation practice? Times of day that work best, frequency, duration of meditation sessions? That's a really good question. People ask that all the time. You know, times of day that work best really depend on the person, but morning's usually good. You know, morning's good because it's when the mind often is quiet before, like, you get into the busyness of the day and answering the phone and emails and things like that, and then your mind going places, but it's not critical. The best way to establish a regular meditation practice is to pick a time of day and a place where you think you're going to be able to do it regularly. You know what I mean? So if you have to leave at work at 6 o'clock in the morning, meditating at 5 to 6 probably is not such a good idea. Meditating at 5:30 is probably better. You know, or if, you know, you have to figure that out for yourself. What's good is to create, you know, if you can, you know, make a corner of your room or something and make a little shrine. You know, it doesn't take a lot of space. That's like 2-3 feet. Something inspiring, you know, pictures of Buddha or whatever, or a flower or a view or something, you know. So you know that space is for meditation. You know that time is, the body starts to, and the mind start to acclimate themselves to routine, you know. Think of it like you would do any kind of physical training, you know. And as far as duration, start short. Start with short sessions. 5-10 minutes at the beginning, 20 minutes, you know. Okay, let's dedicate the merit for today's session to the benefit of all beings, particularly dedicate this merit to, you know, bring peace where there's not peace right now. By this merit, may all beings attain a state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Thank you to our generous producer Nick Solidio for his work, without whom we could not do this class. And thank you. Many of you have been with us for a long time, and it's very touching and moving and important to me that you have been here and come here. It's of immense benefit for me in my practice, and I thank you for that. I'm grateful. So see you soon.